Okay. Hi, everyone, and welcome to this extremely special event for Rainbow Baby Week. It's the first time we have done a live panel event, and I'm really excited and delighted to be joined by this amazing lineup, these amazing guests who are going to join me today to talk about perinatal mental health and pregnancy after loss. So just to introduce myself, I'm Amneet Graham. I'm the chair and founder of Willow's Rainbow Box charity, and we support families through pregnancy after loss. And we're the creators of Rainbow Baby Week. And Rainbow Baby Week is all about highlighting all the issues around pregnancy after loss, sharing stories, sharing videos, sharing information for families as well as healthcare professionals. So tonight, as I said, I'm joined by amazing guests. I'm just gonna, before we pass over to those guests, I'm just gonna go through a bit of housekeeping. So your cameras and microphones are off. We are operating a Q&A function tonight, but we have got quite a tight schedule. So we did a pre-event questionnaire where some of our questions have come out from. And so we're going to get through those, and then hopefully we've got some time to address if there's any questions in the Q&A. So there's a little green arrow. I think you can press it and it goes green if you see a question and you want to sort of bump that up to the top to prioritize it, so we know that it's there. And Sean Ness from Cuddlecot has very kindly stepped in to monitor the Q&A for us. So we're all good to go, I think. And just another thing before we start as well, it is a triggering subject. So if you feel at any point you need to step away, please do. Please take care of yourselves. And I'll actually pop our email address into, I don't know if I could do it in the chat now, but I can do like a follow-up email just to make sure everyone knows they can come to us for support. So I'm going to pass over to our amazing panel guests now, because this night is not about me, it is about you and about having a fantastic discussion about such an important topic. So I'm going to start with Grace, because you're first on my screen. If you can introduce yourself, just who you are, what you do, and then just pass around, and then we will dive into this discussion. So thank you, Grace.
Brilliant. Good evening, everyone. On this very warm evening, my name's Grace Nate. I am the lead midwife for the North West London Maternal Mental Health Services called Maternity Trauma and Loss Care. And I will hand over to Manisha.
Hi everyone, I'm Manisha. I wear a few different hats. I'm a counsellor who specialises in baby loss and perinatal mental health. I also co-founded an organisation called Support Me CIC, where we support specifically Muslim and Polish and other global majority backgrounds through maternity care. And I work for the NHS as well around perinatal mental health within the team as a facilitator. And I also work with Amneet quite closely on ASHA training, where we do training around culture-aligned baby loss. I'll pass over to Buki.
Hi everyone. Hi, my name is Buki. Like Manisha, I wear a few hats. So I'm a mum first and foremost, one baby, a lost baby, and one living baby, which has informed my career for the last, 5, 6 years now. I have experience working in maternal mental health as peer support, so supporting other lost mums. And now I am what we call a PWP, or a psychological wellbeing practitioner within the NHS as well. And I'm also in the background setting up a community for bereaved mums as well, which is Sunflower and Lemon. Thank you. Ananya, please, is that how you pronounce your name?
Hi, Ananya. Hi. I am a trauma-informed pregnancy after loss coach. I have a background in reproductive science, and I work as a workplace consultant, helping workplaces improve their policies around miscarriage support through resources and consulting, as well as line manager training. And Amneet, thank you so much for organising this. I think it's such an important evening, and we're going to have great discussions. And I will pass on to Danielle.
Hello, I'm Danielle. I own a business called The Mama Spring. I currently run antenatal and hypnobirthing classes, as well as some baby classes in my local area. Through my business of doing the hypnobirthing courses, I found that there was so much emphasis on trust your body. Having had multiple losses, I've had 5 miscarriages, I've got 3 children. I just found that I couldn't trust my body and I needed something else, but there was nothing out there. I searched and couldn't find anything. So I've created a bit of a program called Holding Hope, which is audio tracks and hypnosis tracks for people who are pregnant after a loss and just building up like their confidence, and things like tracks to listen to before you go to a scan and common worries and things like that. So I'm so excited to be here and to share this panel with so many amazing people. So thank you. I think I'm the last one. Have I missed anyone? I was trying to look at the list of names.
Kenya, I think.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kenya, and I am an assistant psychologist. So I currently work in Helix. We cover, well, the Helix I work in is in South East London, and we're situated across 3 boroughs across South East London, and then we have a sister one that is situated across the other 4. And I'm also the perinatal faculty representative and the EDI lead on the British Psychological Society's Division of Clinical Psychology faculty network. But yeah, very grateful to be here today, and I'm excited to see like the richness of the conversations that we'll be having.
Thank you so much. So as you can see, we are joined by a kind of a wide variety of experience, professional experience and lived experience. So yeah, let's get straight into the discussion. My first question is going to be directed at Grace and Kenya. So we surveyed 14 people who've been pregnant after loss about their perinatal mental health experience. One of the questions was on a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being not very well supported and 5 being really well supported. How supported did you feel by your healthcare team with your mental health during pregnancy after loss? And the most popular answer was 3, so a middle figure. So what do you think a middle rating could be telling us about support within current services?
Should I start, Kenya? Yeah, so I think a middle rating, especially when it's the most common response, I think that usually signals some ambivalence. So people didn't feel completely unsupported, but they also didn't feel fully and consistently cared for. I think that's something that I was holding in mind, just thinking about this question, and especially in the context of pregnancy after loss and support from perinatal mental health services. I think when I think about this particular question, and it really depends on if we're talking about one group of particular people. So that was something I wasn't quite sure if it's all South Asian women that this question was targeted or asked of. I think what's really important is that we mustn't assume the meaning of what 3 out of 5 means, because it can mean something different to everyone. So I think the findings should be interpreted with the context of culture, language, family structure, faith, health inequalities, and experiences and previous experiences of healthcare services. And I think the score, in my mind, could indicate and inform us that we have, when we talk about NHS care, it's really important that we talk about the system, and the system does not fit one size, and hence the reason why with a survey of 3 out of 5, it just informs me again as a midwife that the system is systemically wrong. And I will use that word. There are other words I could use. However, I would use it as systemically not fit necessarily for everyone's purpose. And so if we're talking about feeling support. So support is present, but not, but inconsistent. I think the 3 out of 5 could suggest women felt some professionals were helpful, while others may not be so helpful, or that support varied across appointments. But then when we think about that in a wider context, when we're thinking healthcare is very much still a postcode lottery. So if someone lived in my area, Northwest London, and our service is there to support women and birthing people who have experienced loss, we know that we have a service that we can offer. But if they live somewhere else, they may not get that equal service as well. So we even know with our maternal mental health services, we are sometimes, because of funding, we offer something different across the patch. So there is inequity of service across nationally. I think also when I think about emotionally needs not necessarily being fully met. There is a research. Happy to actually share that with you so that others can have a look. And please tell me when to stop, because once I start, I do start talking. But research on early pregnancy loss showed many women reported dissatisfaction with emotional support. This particular research of 2025 and follow-ups suggested around 70% of those that took part in this research said that they didn't receive adequate aftercare. So a middle score for that can also reflect feelings of being seen medically, but not being fully supported psychologically. And I've talked about the postcode lottery. Shall I, Kenya, I can go on, but Kenya, is there anything that you would like to sort of input there?
I was just thinking about how I like when you was touching on aspects of health inequity and kind of what that means for people. I think when you think about women and birthing people and their wider families and support systems, I think free is very much a human response. And I think it's quite a neutral one, but I think sometimes do people expect to be neutral because are they going to get the most entire the best response if they gave you a 1 compared to that, and then it's actually quite true and honest being in that middle ground. And something that I see that it's kind of speaking to that gap that we do see within services and what they intend to offer. And when Grace was touching on the postcode lottery, I was even just thinking about kind of what's offered in our service and then what is offered within our service, the other Helix version. We accept self-referrals, and then our sister in service doesn't. And what does that mean in terms of access, the voices that we're trying to do, trying to reach? And I think when looking at that, I think that's what I see with free is that it's an invitation. I think it's an invitation to kind of learn from the lived experiences of the people that are accessing our services, and knowing that, when I look at our service, we're relatively all very, very young. So it's we're in that prime space to actually look at change that is culturally safe, but also culturally responsive in a way that is true to the experiences of our service users. And I think it's looking at that intersection of identity, trauma, and loss to know that we can work in a way that is relational, that is built on trust, and then center in humility and that steady presence that we can continue on to work better. But in doing that, you need to actually listen to the experiences and the voices of the people that are accessing our service or couldn't access our services before they were open, and shaping that in the best way and how I see that.
Thank you so much. And there really is something about consistency as well, with so many things within maternity. But yeah, that postcode lottery really does, it's something I've been thinking about today, and about the inconsistency. You have some rainbow clinics in some areas, but not in others. But then also there's a lot of focus on clinical care, and not as much with the psychological well-being and emotional side of things, which again is one of the reasons I held this discussion, because it's such an important topic, but there isn't as much support out there. But thank you so much, both of you, for feeding into that. Manisha, my next question is directed at you. If anyone else wants to come in after Manisha to with any thoughts as well, that's fine. So although all the responses to our survey were from the person who was pregnant, we acknowledge that dads and other parents also go on their own journey through pregnancy after loss. So in your experience as a perinatal counsellor, what do you think could make perinatal mental health support more inclusive for dads and other parents experiencing pregnancy after loss?
Thank you, Amneet. And it is a really, really important question, because I think when I do the work that I do as a counsellor, a lot of the people who tend to think that the service is for them are the people who experience the loss. And I think one of the things that is really important is acknowledging who is in that room from a healthcare professional perspective, not as someone who is supporting the person who's experienced loss, but actually, you know, their own grief. They need to have their own grief acknowledged as individual. I also think that there needs to be more done to create those spaces for them to be able to explore their grief in their own right. Sometimes when there are groups for couples, again, I hear quite a lot, I can't grieve because they're going through it worse, or they've been through the physicality of it, so I can't talk about, I feel guilty talking about my experience of it when theirs is so much worse. So I think the individual spaces is really important to see that they have an individual journey. And also the other thing that comes up is grief looks very, very different for different people. So sometimes they may not need the same thing as their partners. They may need something else, but they don't know what that is, or they don't know where to look. It seems to be harder for people, I think, dads and partners, to find support for them than it is for the person who's been through it. And I think it's trying to open up those conversations. And it's very similar to when it starts from maternity care, because even when we look at maternity care, you've got the mother or the birthing person come in, and you have midwives, healthcare professionals, where their focus is quite solely on that person. I remember from my experience, I don't think my husband was ever really addressed in that room. So it's very similar. This is even more, you know, it's so heavy, it's so tragic, it's something that needs so much support. And that feeling of being ignored, dismissed, minimized can, you know, really impact not only how that person grieves, how they process it, how they support themselves, how they support their partner, and following, you know, experiences. So I think it's that having to that acknowledgement of, are you okay? How are you doing? You know, even if you take them aside, is how are you doing? What do you need? And not just the once, it's something that has to keep being asked, you know, regularly. Because initially they may say, I'm fine, let's just focus, you know, on my partner. But actually, if you stop asking those questions, it's maybe not giving them the opportunity to get the support that they need.
Thank you, Manisha. Did anyone else have anything to say about that? No, I just wanted to say as well, one of the things as a charity, because we do have kind of a dedicated space on our website, which is for dads and other parents, and it was kind of born from my experience with my husband as well. Like, there wasn't anything, it was very much, this is how you can help me, like, rather than how you can help yourself. And so that's kind of why we created that area, or co-created with a couple of other organisations, because it is so important to acknowledge their own journey through that. But yeah, thank you for your perspective, Manisha. I'm going to move on to this question's for Buki and Danielle. So some people have expressed their journey of pregnancy after loss as feeling terrified. The anxiety is all-consuming, and an internal conflict between joy and sadness, gratefulness and guilt. How do you think antenatal education and psychological support better support people to navigate those emotions while preparing for parenthood? Danielle, do you want to start?
Yes, I can. My experience of this was shocking, if I'm honest. There was nothing locally for me once I was pregnant again after a loss. I mentioned it to my midwife and she was like, but you're pregnant. And I really struggled. Personally, I really struggled. I was just terrified my whole pregnancy. And I think having that right antenatal support and that understanding, and even just if I had somebody to talk to, would have made the world of difference for me. Even parents that I support now and speak to now quite often say that there's just nothing. There is nothing to help them. Everything in antenatal NHS wise, locally for me, is very much focused on like, here's a set of questions, we tick a lot of boxes. There's nothing for mental health and how the mum's actually coping. So I think there's a huge gap, and I think that the right antenatal education can make the world of difference to both mum and partner. Sort of following on from the last question as well, I think it can make the world of difference, and even just acknowledging that actually fear and hope can sit side by side and can travel together on this path. And just I think, and I don't want to sound like I'm advertising because I'm really not, but that's partly why I've created like Holding Hope, just to have some journaling prompts to sort of allow parents to navigate how they're feeling and work through their emotions. I think can make the world of difference. So sort of coming back to the question, I think there is absolutely scope for better support, and it could be massively improved. But I think there are lots more things out there now than there was. Like, my eldest daughter's 8, my youngest is 4, so there's more and more out there, and charities like yourself are making the world of difference. So yeah, I think I've kind of answered.
Thanks, Danielle. And Buki, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I know we're touching on this later, but my experience of the support I've personally received during my pregnancy after loss was what I would call 10-10. So I can sort of draw on that and see in my previous work where, you know, the system has failed people through the journey of pregnancy after loss, and also the good care I had. And I think it's really important what Danielle was saying about that duality, you know, the joy, the sorrow, the excitement, the apprehension existing together. So creating the space for that family to be honest about the truth of that experience and not forcing them to be on that sort of, maybe you could say, the toxic positivity side of, you know, we're here now, because in reality, it's not like that for many families just because they are now pregnant. I mean, for me, no safe, you know, zone existed for me because of, I guess, when my loss occurred in the pregnancy. And maybe I would have been like that regardless. And that's the thing. Everyone's, some people might identify a safe zone, for example, but the idea that everyone's response to pregnancy after loss is going to be individual to them. So you may get people who are willing to bring into the space the babies or baby that they've lost before. There might be others who don't want to do that, and it's just making it okay for whatever way they choose to show up with their lived experiences as well. And we all know, probably everyone here understands that language is so important as well, and mirroring what that family are doing, what they're choosing to do, and also being aware that that can fluctuate throughout that journey as well. There may be points where, you know, family are more comfortable to use this type of language, then it could change because of how things are coming up for them. There might be certain anniversaries, so maybe at that time they want to bring, you know, losses or the babies that they've had into the space. So just really sort of being human in your approach. This family have gone through, you know, the unimaginable traumas here, and what do they need, not assuming it's one size fits all again. And I would say it's really important, if you don't have the expertise, being aware of where you might fall short, and not necessarily using that family as guinea pigs, but being like, okay, what can I do in this moment? What do they need that might be outside of, you know, my remit and my skill set, my knowledge? and just becoming aware of what else is out there, because as Danielle was just saying, there are other resources. I mean, for me, there wasn't much at the time when it came to my actual loss, but with my pregnancy after loss, there was more things out there. And sometimes you might even have to look at, international things as well, whatever resources. Hopefully I've answered that question there. Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you. Yes, I think knowing what's out there and kind of seeing all of the different organisations. I know one of the things we'll be doing this week is showcasing some of the organisations, both international and national ones, that are doing amazing work around this, because I think just building up that, you can't possibly know and be able to offer everything yourself. So it's just about knowing where to signpost people to get that, so they can get the best support for them. We've touched a little bit on health inequalities, which is a subject I'm massively passionate about. And again, it's something that's underrepresented in the world of loss. So I wanted to ask this question to Manisha and Buki, because I know that you do some work with your various hats, looking after diverse families. So some people have told us that faith and culture was a source of strength and comfort on their pregnancy after loss journey. And for others, they lost their connection with faith after loss. From your perspectives and work, how can we support people to navigate these feelings around faith, identity, and culture in pregnancy after loss? Who'd like to start? I know Buki's just spoken, so Manisha.
I don't mind. Yeah, I can go. Yeah, really important. And I think this is actually at the core of a lot of what I do. I think sometimes there's an assumption when it comes to faith, spirituality, and culture that it's very black and white. Like, oh, they are Christian or Muslim or Jewish, so they are going to believe this. I think we need to move away from that, and actually spirituality and faith are so personal. However they may show up and present physically, the actual, faith and their beliefs are very, very individual and personal. So I think the first thing is not to make assumptions and not to make meaning out of it that they're not making. It's really important to take their lead. And I do a lot of work within the Muslim community, and there is a lot of up and down when it comes to being able to draw strength and comfort in times when it's more difficult to. And sometimes that for some people will feel like, oh, that means I'm not, Muslim enough, I'm not religious enough. Whereas actually it's not about that at all. It's about trying to figure out, how do you go through such a difficult time, holding on to your faith in the way that it matters to you and the way that it supports you. So the first thing is not to make those assumptions and not to make meaning out of it, and just sharing and holding that in a really non-judgmental way. The other thing that I say from a counselling point of view, and this is my conversations that I've had with a lot of healthcare professionals who maybe are of a different faith or of no faith, sometimes they don't always know what's theirs and what's the person in front of them. So, for example, when I do some training around supporting Muslim families, and we can have a Muslim couple where they're praising God at the time of loss, and this happens quite commonly within our community. I remember speaking to a midwife, and she actually said that she was really upset and angry. And then I asked her quite curiously and gently, whose anger was that? Was that yours, or was that theirs? Because that was obviously giving them comfort. And it's the other way round as well. I've heard of situations where somebody from the same faith have told a family, be strong, they're in heaven or God's with them, but that's not the appropriate time for them to hear that. And I think that's why it's really important to take the lead of the person that you are supporting, move away from assumptions, move away from trying to make meaning for them, hear them, and just be present with them. I think it's so incredibly important. And like Buki was saying earlier, the language, mirroring the language is so important here. And it can change from one day to the next, from 1 minute to the next. And that's okay. And it's about allowing them to be and feel and express in whatever makes sense to them.
Thank you, Manisha. Buki, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think the points that Manisha's made are literally my understanding of it as well, to be honest. You cannot make assumptions. That's so important. Even, from like myself, the boxes I'm not going to tick, sorry, the box I would tick is probably not the one that the healthcare professional would always assume that I would tick. That's what I found. And when maybe they didn't understand my beliefs, again, don't use me as a guinea pig, because it's not, what I'm here to do. I'm not here to educate people all the time. So we're carrying so much, women or families that are going through pregnancy after loss in the first place. So I guess that inquiry, if there is any, needs to be sensitive and appropriate, and think about, is it going to benefit that family, or can I do it in another way? And also just the understanding that faith can be shattered, through these experiences. And it might not be the appropriate time to even support someone to, build that back up, if that's not the space that they're in. So again, just giving them the room to show up as they are through that experience. When their sort of journey continues, that may change itself. And again, what we were saying before, people's connection with their beliefs, it can be strengthened, it can be shattered, and all of it should be normalized, and no judgment should be placed, and any expectations, how people, show up generally. That's what I would say.
Muted myself because there was sirens outside. Thank you so much for both of you for those responses. And yeah, it's I think me and Manisha talk about this a lot, that making assumptions is just, and generalizations, you just can't do it. And I think particularly in the training work we do, people kind of think that they want the answers of this culture does this, and it just doesn't work like that. It's about people meeting people where they are. So thank you both of you. My next question is to Ananya. So the majority of people in our survey told us that they did not feel well supported by their employer in their workplace. In your opinion, how big a contribution does the workplace have to mental health in pregnancy after loss? And what should a supportive conversation about pregnancy after loss look like in the workplace?
Such an important conversation. I think this is actually one of the reasons why I experienced pregnancy loss and pregnancy after loss in a corporate workplace without the support that I felt I needed. And now that's one of my focuses. And it's such an important discussion to have, because most of us, we have the workplace that we need to go to. We can't opt out of it like we can opt out of maybe a family event that might feel a bit triggering, or of an event. So it's really the place where we can either really have that support and trust built through our employer or workplace, or it can be a place where it brings up a lot of anxiety. So I think what's really important, and what I've seen, is that when companies and organizations show this sense of proactiveness in wanting to provide this enhanced support and resources in the workplace, it can really change and influence that person's experience of this, pregnancy after loss within the workplace. I think it's really important actually to just note and mention the law in terms of the changes in employment rights bill coming in for bereavement leave for pre-24 weeks, which will be coming in 2027. But whilst that's a separate conversation, I think it's really important to highlight, because what it shows is there's a shift happening. If it's taken this long to have that conversation, and currently when pregnancy after loss isn't, it just goes so under discussed, which is why these sorts of events and panels and discussions are so important. It means that shift is coming to provide better support. And with that, I've seen, and we've probably seen already, people that are sharing their experience of pregnancy loss, if they've got a public platform, are then opening up that conversation for better support for pregnancy after loss as well. So one example is Grace Beverley has shared publicly about her miscarriage, and then what has led her to then provide an enhanced miscarriage policy for one of her companies, Tala. And what's interesting to note there is that has been through her own experience, and it's been before the law has mandated it, which shows that there is an appetite, there is a real need and want for certain companies, organizations to improve the support, and that in itself will then open up the conversation for pregnancy after loss. So I think that's one thing, that as soon as that is becoming more normalized, it means that pregnancy after loss and that mental health support that's so needed is, we're in a shift, I think, which is good, and it brings a lot of optimism for, I think, the future and what's ahead. But in terms of what inclusive and good support looks like, I think, as we've kind of mentioned already, like, I think one of the main things is not to make assumptions and to have a really collaborative conversation. And in terms of, there are certain touch points that need to happen if someone, discloses their pregnancy at work. There are certain things that have to happen. There are certain things that are in place, and definitely areas that could be improved. So throughout that stage and duration and journey of pregnancy after loss in the workplace, there's from telling your manager that you're pregnant again. Of course, there's no onus on the employee to share maybe a previous history of loss or previous challenge to, their path to parenthood. But so the risk there is that maybe if they don't disclose, or there's no history of it, that pregnancy gets just treated as a pregnancy, maybe a first pregnancy, without the nuance and the textured layer that pregnancy after loss brings. So what could be there and what could add to the supportiveness of it is, having a way to have just a single flag when that person is maybe returning to work, or on their HR record with consent, of course, that can be traveled through, so that that person doesn't need to have to then disclose every time, retell that story, because that it brings so much anxiety, so much physical, emotional exhaustion of having to have those conversations over and over again. In the same way, it's a requirement to have a risk assessment when you disclose a pregnancy, so for the employer. But what should be there is a psychological risk assessment as well at regular intervals. And often that gets neglected, or it doesn't get discussed. But one simple way to do that is to have the conversation of, okay, what would support look like? Is there anything else that from a previous loss that would affect what support looks like for you? What can we do to ensure that you receive the support that you feel like, could be helpful for you? Similarly, in terms of scan days and extra monitoring, often it is neglected that perhaps a pregnancy after loss, can come with extra challenges, extra monitoring, and a requirement there is already, if someone has disclosed their pregnancy, you are entitled to paid time off for the antenatal care. If that's recommended by a doctor, midwife, not just the standard scans, but also you might be needing extra. And what I found is, speaking to people, that there is this need to justify the extra scans, and that then also contributes to the extra anxiety that you then need to have that conversation with your line manager, or staff member, or whatever it is. So perhaps it could be that you pre-agree when you have those conversations around disclosing the pregnancy, and having a collaborative conversation, because again, as we've discussed, no one journey, no one way is the way. It really needs to meet that person where they're at. So in summary, I guess ask, don't make assumptions. It's so important to note that every employee going through loss or pregnancy after loss, they have a unique experience that they feel comfortable to share. Yeah.
Thank you so much. It is such an important topic, like opening up those safe conversations. I mean, I know through my own personal experience, I didn't have those safe conversations with my employer, but even those extra scans and the kind of anxiety and psychological well-being of that person who's going through all of that, it needs to be considered on that journey. So it isn't just an extra scan that they need time off for. I think they really, I guess, in an ideal world, just real good check-ins and psychological support for that person and acknowledgement of what they're going through, so that they don't have to feel like the burden, I guess, on what's going on their employer. But thank you so much. I'm glad we've touched on that subject as well. The next two questions are open questions, so I am hoping someone will like put their hand up to answer, or we can kind of discuss it together. So the next question is, we are all too familiar with inequities within maternal healthcare. When it comes to perinatal mental health and pregnancy after loss, what good examples of inclusive support and breaking down barriers to accessing care have you encountered? So we're very much kind of highlighting the good examples that you may have come across in your work. Manisha.
My role, actually. So I am a specialist facilitator for Muslim families in Nottinghamshire Perinatal Care, which is an NHS service. And I know how hard my manager worked 2 years to get this role up and running. And it's 1 day a week where I can focus on reviewing, looking at the current services. I run a group specifically for Muslim families, adapting it. We've done focus groups. We train. We've done some training for local Muslim organisations as well, so they can understand what that referral pathway is, what perinatal mental health is. We're doing kind of informal sessions for the community around perinatal mental health. And it's so important to put the time and effort in. I think the main thing is there is never going to be a quick fix, ever. I think we have to learn to invest time and energy into building long-term relationships. Even when I started the community work that I was doing within the Muslim community in Nottingham, it took me, and I'm from that community, I think a year and a half to even build that trust within my own community, and which I was then able to kind of give them that support back through what I do within the NHS. And I like to use this as an example of there is no one way. However, if we're looking at good practice, this can definitely be transferable to different communities and different areas, because the main thing is about hearing, like really hearing, going in, meeting them where they are, going into the community, and being brave enough to look at your services and ask yourself, okay, because we're seeing, I think one of the things that we see within perinatal mental health is that for Black, Asian, global majority migrant families, they are coming in when they're very acute. They're coming in when they need support from psychiatry. They're coming in when they need to be admitted to mum and baby. They're coming in at a time where the lower early interventions are no longer going to support them. So that's what I'm doing, is trying to find ways to get them to refer themselves in earlier to prevent that from happening. So I love my role, and I love shouting out about it because it's such a good example of that good practice when it comes to equity.
Thank you so much. It sounds amazing. And building that trust, yeah, I agree. It takes time to build that trust, time and investment as well. So it's really great to hear about that happening. Grace is next.
Yeah, I was, Manisha, that's absolutely amazing and fantastic. And I think it's what's needed nationally. We need people like you, and we need roles like yours to just be there so that everyone can tap in and have that support. I guess I feel where we're trying to break down barriers as a maternity trauma and loss care service is actually joint working together is really powerful. Co-producing work, working with our experts by experience is also really important as well. And as well as going into the community. So we are quite a small service. However, we have learnt, and we are still learning, to work as a wider perinatal service. So we come together to do things together, and it's not just doing it in perinatal. I have 4 midwives that work across each trust, and having the midwives there embedded into maternity services is also really key. I think developing a relationship where you have maternity, perinatal, bereavement specialists, midwives as well, lived experience, working even on things such as we're working and just revamping one of our listening service leaflets, actually having people who have lived that journey is so key. Having that voice really loud is so important, because the way I may see services should develop, it can't work on its own. It means it will fail. So for me, it's really important to co-produce work, have funding for sustainable work as well. I think that's really important. Having funding for our expert by experiences, working with our experts in the maternity system as well. I feel for us in Northwest London that I feel really humbled that we are really, I don't say that we've got it right, but we are trying to engage and get it together so that we work together. But the system in itself can be a force that can actually be quite sad in the systems. However, having powerful people, having people who are compassionate, having the compassionate people that can also, who believe that it's important to come together to train our midwives, our student midwives, our obstetricians, in terms of how others who are using the service are experiencing the service. And this is what we've been able to do in small ways, but I still feel that we're taking ground. So for me, having our service there is brilliant. The challenges are around sustainability, but I can see in the few years that we have been up and running that we've started really to engage more with the community. And I think it's not about bringing the community to us, but it's actually us going out there. And what's really interesting about that statement, I always say when people say it's about them coming to us, I said, but actually every day they have their appointments, they come to us. What is it that we are doing to actually approach them? And it's all about working in a trauma-informed setting, having that trauma-informed mindset, but also really just engaging. And that's why I love doing my job, because there's so much more that needs to be done. But when I see people, women, birthing people saying, I feel like I can go on. Your continuity, what you have given us has really made me feel empowered, that then they become EBEs to empower others. It's just such a beautiful process. But we just need money. This is the other thing. We need money to sustain that. And I'll stop there. Yeah.
No, that is all amazing. I completely agree with with all of that as well. And of course we've said, it needs to be funded and sustainable. It's a horrible situation where you can implement, this happens a lot, you know, things are implemented and then they just end after a period of time because there's just no resource for it, and then that community, they suffer from it. Kenya, you had your hand up next.
Yes, I was just going to speak about how, like, when I think being in a service that's very, very new and kind of like still developing and still growing means that the heart of kind of like what it means when we're looking at things like co-production and community engagement is there from the get-go. I think I'm incredibly fortunate that part of my job means that I get to work with some of our community organisations and go to mother and baby groups and sit down with some of the local communities that sometimes won't, you know, come to us at a hospital, but they come we're with them there, and we can actually explain what the service they're doing is about. But also it kind of just like shows that we're human. I think sometimes the focus on certain things means that as clinicians you kind of sometimes start to lose a little bit of your humanity because you just focus on other aspects. And I think kind of like breaking barriers down into that way is really, really important. And I think in doing that, it's important to kind of like center how language is very, very much important when it comes to that journey. One of my pet peeves, I think Grace touched on it a little bit, is when people say that like clients and people that we work with are hard to engage. And I go, what does that actually mean? More often it's that services have been hard to access, hard to trust, or historically have not been built with certain communities in mind. And then when they are kind of like being developed, it's kind of like that add-on that, oh gosh, we need to think about all this and we need to add on all these experiences. But I think when you start like that from the beginning and you're thinking about that richness and diversity, you're helping to not like unintentionally reinforce the idea that the problem sits with the clients that are accessing our services, and rather the structures and histories and inequalities that make care feel distant or unsafe in that way. So I think it's important to just have that in mind at all times to make sure that it is safe, because sometimes you may be a clinician that has to then access certain services, and that's sometimes when we see what is going wrong more. So I think it shouldn't be that we're doing this as like a add-on. It should be right there from the beginning and learning from that lived experience.
Thank you so much. Buki?
Yeah, I was just thinking about, for myself, I didn't want to be cared for my pregnancy after loss in my city at all, for different reasons, including the fact that I worked in maternal mental service, so I didn't want my colleagues to know I was pregnant straight away and things like that. So it's quite nuanced in that way. But one thing that I felt quite comfortable with accessing Tommy's support, and so my second pregnancy was consultant led, and it was under the Rainbow Clinic, and I had to travel every week. It got to a point where I was getting the train and really going out of my way because I really wanted me and my baby to get the best care. So anyway, I'm sort of mentioning that because for me, from the jump, when I went on that website and I saw that they were unapologetic in acknowledging these inequalities and saying this is a thing, we're not gaslighting here. This is a thing that is happening. We understand that, and this is our attempt, our solution that we're going to put out there is to having this dedicated telephone number. Somebody will get back to you, and straight away I just felt quite seen because it's not a tick box exercise, and it was very open and honest and saying that this is a space for you for that reason. So I just immediately felt, because you can imagine your trust is so broken, but just seeing that there made me go out of my way to do all of my care quite a far distance away, which again speaks to the postcode as well, because there wasn't even a service exactly the same on my doorstep anyway. But yeah, I think in terms of being transparent about the challenges as well, and not just talking amongst other professionals about it, but also to communities as well, I think is quite a powerful beginning for someone to actually trust in a service.
Thank you so much. I think we could probably talk all day about this topic. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing all of your answers to that. I've got one final question, and I think we're coming to the end as well. So someone asked on the survey, we often talk about the first year of grief. How should services better support parents 10, 15 or 20 years on when the world has moved on but loss hasn't? anyone want to? Ananya?
Yeah, I thought that was a really interesting question because when I work one-to-one with people, I see an arc of them at different stages. And I think what's important to highlight at different stages of anyone's grief, and then if they move through to pregnancy after loss, they need different things. And something patterns that I see when I've worked with people that are navigating pregnancy loss and then pregnancy after loss and then into parenthood after loss, a lot of the patterns might have started in pregnancy after loss, and it might not have stemmed from the original loss, but then it shows up in different ways. So certain tendencies like, perfectionism, someone who's pregnant after loss has already spent months feeling that anxiety and then tracking every symptom, every scan, and having that something might go wrong, or this has to go perfectly this time. There's a sense of needing to control the outcome, as well as not being able to trust, things going right. And mainly because, loss teaches the nervous system that things can go wrong without warning. So we're always in that state of hypervigilance. And what I've noticed in people is that it can often show up as overfunctioning as a form of self-protection. So where there's the inability to relax and then actually enjoy or experience joy, even if they've, experienced that grief years before. And so I think what's really important here is to work on and retrain the nervous system through body-based, processes, but also a lot of what I talk about is expanding capacity to, as we've discussed, pregnancy after loss comes with so much nuance, comes with so much needing to hold so many different emotions at every, at different times. It might be different from this stage to the next, from now to tomorrow. So expanding and having resources where we can expand that capacity to hold this emotion right now, and also let go of that pressure in order to feel one thing, and know that no emotion is wrong in whatever stage or season of this journey you're in.
Thank you so much. Danielle, I just wanted to ask, in terms of like antenatal education, have you had people come to you who've had loss a long time ago, and like how does that how do you support them in that situation?
The people I've had come into me have generally been people who've had losses sort of within the last couple of years, which is still very raw and very fresh for them, I guess. And I think we've talked quite a lot about taking lead from the couple and taking lead from their language and everything. And I think if I was to get people who'd had losses sort of 10 or whatever years previously, I think I would just take their lead. And I think sort of reminding them that things have changed quite dramatically actually since my losses, and supporting them to reach out to different places that I never knew. But no, it has generally been people who have had losses more recently, and actually the majority of people that I've worked with, it's been sort of IVF losses as well. It hasn't really been people who've had sort of natural pregnancies and then had losses. It tends to be IVF, which has really surprised me, but I think they kind of come to me wanting to step away from the medicalized side of things. So I know with my pregnancy, because of my losses, I was put into high risk category, and I did not want to be consultant-led high risk, because in my head I was like, I haven't got to this stage of pregnancy before. And even though it kind of, from day one, I didn't believe I was pregnant, and I didn't believe until I was in labor. And then even when I had this baby, I was like, hang on, I've never been able to keep a baby alive for this long. And that's how I told myself. But no, I think, answering your question, it has been people, I think, whose pregnancies and losses have been quite recent. So yeah, it's been quite raw for them still, I think.
Thank you. We are literally right at the end. Ananya, is it a quick comment? Oh, did you not mean to put your hand up?
I didn't mean, sorry.
Okay.
It was I just
No,
forgot to put
that's
it down,
fine.
sorry.
Sean, are you there?
I am.
I can only see one comment in the Q&A. Is that correct?
That is just the
Okay.
one.
So I'll just address that now before the end. No, that is something we could follow up with. It was very much just a very short questionnaire, just getting some ideas for questions. But yeah, it would be interesting to exactly know what their answer was about why they averaged a 3. But yeah, I think for the purpose of this, it's just I wanted to kind of get that idea from the panel to really kind of dig into why that middle figure might be something that people would have chosen. Yeah, I can't see any more comments, so I'm going to close this now, and I'm just going to say thank you so much to my amazing panel. You've all been amazing, and I'm so glad we've touched on various different areas of perinatal mental health and pregnancy after loss. The conversation doesn't end here. Like I always say that about things, you know, you can have an event, but we will continue to push for things and continue to highlight perinatal mental health and pregnancy after loss, and just improving services and making more available for families. And also in terms of research, I mean, I put an article up earlier about some of the research that is out there, and there's some, but there's not enough. And then there's things missing about, you know, different intersectionalities and cultural backgrounds and dads and other parents. And there's just so much missing that we don't know at the moment about pregnancy after loss. So yeah, we'll continue to push, and just a massive thank you to everyone for joining. Oh, and just seen a comment, just thank you to everyone involved tonight. It's been a really great discussion. So thank you very much. This has been recorded, so I'll be speaking to the organizer to figure out how to get that to everyone. But yeah, thank you all for joining me.